far as Happy Camp. "Yes," he said with consequence, "I've 1,000 dozen eggs at Linderman, and my boat's just about got the last seam caulked. Consider myself in luck to get it. Boats are at a premium, you know, and none to be had." Whereupon, and almost with bodily violence, the correspondents clamored to go with him, fluttered greenbacks before his eyes, and spilled yellow twenties from hand to hand. He could not hear of it, but they over persuaded him, and he reluctantly consented to take them at $300 apiece. Also they pressed upon him the passage money in advance; and while they wrote to their respective journals concerning the Good Samaritan with the 1,000 dozen eggs, the Good Samaritan was hurrying back to the Swede at Linderman. "Here, you, give me that boat," was his salutation, his hand jingling the correspondent's gold pieces and his eyes hungrily bent upon the finished craft. The Swede regarded him stolidly and shook his head. "How much is the other fellow paying? 300? Well, here's 4. Take it." He tried to press it upon him, but the man backed away. "I tank not. I say him give der skiff boat. You yust wait." "Here's 600. Last call. Take it or leave it. Tell him it's a mistake." The Swede wavered. "I tank, yes," he finally said; and the last Rasmunsen saw of him his vocabulary was going to wreck in a vain effort to explain the mistake to the other fellows. The German slipped and broke his ankle on the steep hogback above Deep Lake, sold out his stock for $1 a dozen, and with the proceeds hired Indian packers to carry him back to Dyea. But on the morning Rasmunsen shoved off with his correspondence, his 2 rivals followed suit. "How many you got?" one of them, a lean little New Englander, called out. 1,000 dozen, Rasmunsen answered proudly. "Huh! I'll go you even stakes. I beat you in with my 800." The correspondents offered to lend him the money, but Rasmunsen declined, and the Yankee closed with the remaining rival, a brawny son of the sea and sailor of ships and things, who promised to show them all a wrinkle or two when it came to cracking on. And crack on he did. With a large tarpaulin square sail, which pressed the bow half under at every jump, he was the first to run out of Linderman, but disdaining the portage, piled his loaded boat on the rocks in the boiling rapids. Rasmunsen and the Yankee, who likewise had 2 passengers, portaged across on their backs, and then lined their empty boats down through the bad water to Bennett. Bennett was a 25-mile lake, narrow and deep, a funnel between the mountains through which storms ever romped. Rasmunsen camped on the sand pit at its head, where were many men and boats bound north in the teeth of the Arctic winter. He awoke in the morning to find a piping gale from the south, which caught the chill from the whited peaks and glacial valleys, and blew as cold as north wind ever blew. But it was fair, and he also found the Yankee staggering past the first bold headland with all sails set. Boat after boat was getting under way, and the correspondents fell to with enthusiasm. "We'll catch him before Caribou Crossing," they assured Rasmunsen, as they ran up to sail, and the Alma took the first icy spray over her bow. Now Rasmunsen, all his life, had been prone to cowardice on water, but he clung to the kicking steering oar with set face and determined jaw. His 1,000 dozen were there in the boat before his eyes, safely secured beneath the correspondent's baggage, and somehow before his eyes were the little cottage and the mortgage for $1,000. It was bitter cold. Now and again he hauled in the steering sweep and put out a fresh one, while his passengers chopped the ice from the blade. Wherever the spray struck, it turned instantly to frost, and the dipping boom of the spritsail was quickly fringed with icicles. The Alma strained and hammered through the big seas till the seams and butts began to spread. But in lieu of bailing, the correspondents chopped ice and flung it overboard. There was no let up. The mad race with winter was on, and the boats tore along in a desperate string. We can't stop to save our souls," one of the correspondents chattered from cold, not fright. "That's right. Keep her down the middle, old man," the other encouraged. Rasmunsen replied with an idiotic grin. The iron-bound shores were in a lather of foam, and even down the middle the only hope was to keep running away from the big seas. To lower sail was to be overtaken and swamped. Time and again they passed boats pounding among the rocks, and once they saw one on the edge of the breakers about to strike. A little craft behind them, with two men, jibbed over and turned bottom up. "Watch out, old man!" cried he of the chattering teeth. Rasmunsen grinned and tightened his aching grip on the sweep. Scores of times had the send of the sea caught the big square stern of the Alma and thrown her off from dead before it till the afterleach of the spritsail fluttered hollowly; and each time, and only with all his strength, had he forced her back. His grin by then had become fixed, and it disturbed the correspondents to look at him. They roared down past an isolated rock 100 yards from shore. From its wave-drenched top a man shrieked wildly, for the instant cutting the storm with his voice. But the next instant the Alma was by, and the rock growing a black speck in the troubled froth. "That settles the Yankee! Where's the sailor?" shouted one of his passengers. Rasmunsen shot a glance over his shoulder at a black square sail. He had seen it leap up out of the gray to windward, and for an hour off and on had been watching it grow. The sailor had evidently repaired damages and was making up for lost time. "Look at him come!" Both passengers stopped chopping ice to watch. 20 miles of Bennett were behind them, room and to spare for the sea to toss up its mountains toward the sky. Sinking and soaring like a storm god, the sailor drove by them. The huge sail seemed to grip the boat from the crest of the waves, to tear it bodily out of the water and fling it crashing and smothering down into the yawning troughs. "The sea'll never catch him." "But he'll run her nose under." Even as they spoke, the black tarpaulin swooped from sight behind a big comber. The next wave rolled over the spot, and the next, but the boat did not reappear. The Alma rushed by the place. A little riffraff of oats and boxes was seen. An arm thrust up and a shaggy head broke surface a score of yards away. For a time there was silence. As the end of the lake came in sight, the waves began to leap aboard with such steady recurrence that the correspondents no longer chopped ice, but flung the water out with buckets. Even this would not do, and after a shouted conference with Rasmunsen, they attacked the baggage. Flour, bacon, beans, blankets, cooking stove, ropes, odds and ends, everything they could get hands on flew overboard. The boat acknowledged it at once, taking less water and rising more buoyantly. "That'll do," Rasmunsen called sternly, as they applied themselves to the top layer of eggs. "The hell it will!" answered the shivering ones savagely. With the exception of their notes, films, and cameras, they had sacrificed their outfit. He bent over, laid hold of an egg box, and began to worry it out from under the lashing. "Drop it! Drop it, I say!" Rasmunsen had managed to draw his revolver, and with the crook of his arm over the sweep head, was taking aim. The correspondent stood up on the thwart, balancing back and forth, his face twisted with menace and speechless anger. "My God!" so cried his brother correspondent, hurling himself face downward into the bottom of the boat. The Alma, under the divided attention of Rasmunsen, had been caught by a great mass of water and whirled around. The afterleach hollowed, the sail emptied and jibbed, and the boom, sweeping with terrific force across the boat, carried the angry correspondent overboard with a broken back.